everybody. Welcome to the Paranormal Portal Podcast. Appreciate you all. Hope you all had a wonderful holiday and was able to get together with those you love and have some quality time. And I'm bringing you another hour of quality time here because I'm going to be joined by Troy from British Columbia, who's here to share a whole host of different experiences he's had through the years. So we're going to dive into that now, so buckle up. Hey everybody, and welcome to the Paranormal Portal Podcast. I'm your host, Brent Thomas. Thank you all for joining us, and special thank you goes out to all of you who continue to support the podcast and continue to spread the word. Always remember, if any of you out there have experiences of your own that you'd like to share, feel free to email me at paranormalportalradio@gmail.com. Again, paranormalportalradio@gmail.com, and you too could be a guest on the show. Troy, welcome to the show. Thank you for coming on, brother.
Thanks for having me, Brent. I really appreciate it.
It's absolutely my pleasure. Thanks so much. It truly is kind of a sacred thing, to me at least, when people are willing to share their, these experiences that maybe in several instances they haven't really talked a lot about them, but they come on and are willing to open up and bring it to the table. But with everybody, I kind of start with, where did this start for you? So was there one catalyzing event where all of this just started happening, or was it just the way your life has always been?
It's a little bit of both, to be honest with you. And it's funny that you say you sort of introed there that not everybody necessarily shares this stuff with other people. And I realized that as you and I started engaging, that I hadn't even really told my wife about these experiences and stuff. And it's not because I was hiding anything or anything like that. It was just simply, it had just kind of gone to the back of my mind until the event that I sent you, which I'm sure we'll get to in a bit. But
sure.
I grew up in a pretty religious context, a pretty conservative Christian context. Mm-hmm. And so the idea of spirituality and something other, an afterlife and that sort of thing, has always been present. So that hasn't been an abnormal concept for me. However, the one terrifying moment, that kind of started things off for me was I'm thinking I was about 7 years old. I can't remember exactly, but, I was sharing a bedroom with my brother. And we stopped sharing a room after I turned 8. So it was somewhere in that 7-8-year-old range.
Okay.
And, I vividly remember being wide awake. I woke up in the middle of the night, dark house, all that kind of stuff. We didn't live in a noisy neighborhood. And I heard an audible voice. Like with my ears, I heard Troy come downstairs. And I didn't really know what to do with that. Like, it didn't really register with me. And so I thought, oh, well, my brother's playing some sort of trick on me, or somebody's messing with me or something. Right. And I look over at my brother. He's out cold, dead to the world. And then I hear it again. Troy, come downstairs. And it's not a voice I recognize. It was a male voice, or what I would perceive to be a male voice. And I literally just hid under my covers and hoped that it went away. And then I eventually fell back asleep. So, that was kind of the one sort of different other type of moment that I first experienced that just caused me to start thinking differently about things.
Right.
And I don't, I remember telling one person, I can't remember who it was, years ago, about this particular experience. And they said, "Did you go downstairs?" And I said, "Absolutely not." I was absolutely terrified as this 7-8-year-old kid.
Right.
And so, that was kind of the first one. And then, and as I was mentioning to you before, there's been a number of things that have taken place, but most of the time I just kind of passed it off as, circumstance, or just didn't really think anything of it until I actually started thinking about it.
Sure.
Right. And then, and so as I did start thinking about it, I thought, oh man, there have been a few.
Right. Now I got to ask you about the voice, because that's a phenomenon that comes up surprisingly often in the paranormal, but usually, and at least in many cases, those voices will sound like a parent. Was this voice familiar or was it just unfamiliar?
No.
Okay.
No, it wasn't familiar. It didn't sound like my parents. There was, there was another time that was one of my parents. My mom yelled at me in her sleep, but I knew it was her. And,
sure.
And that was very clear. But this one, it was almost like, at the time I remember thinking, I wonder if that's an angel, because that was my frame of reference, right? That was I had gone to church, from infancy. My dad had been a pastor years before, and so that was just a really big part of our lives, and so that's the first thing that came to mind. But I was terrified, so I wasn't going to check it out.
Yeah, no doubt. I don't blame you. And my hat's actually off to you, because they say if a spirit ever calls like that, don't answer. And so you did it right.
Yeah.
That's crazy. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So where do we go from here then?
Well, actually, there's another experience that happened in that same house. And this time, I believe it was after I had my own room. So I was probably 9 or 10 by this point. And same kind of thing, nighttime. I woke up and, just kind of, I don't know, I was probably tossing and turning or something like that. But I look up to the door. My bed was kind of opposite the door in the bedroom. But my feet were facing the door, so I could see the hallway, and I always had my door open. And I look and I see something go past my room, like the doorway. And it wasn't a black mass. Like, I know there's a lot of people that have that experience of this like blacker than black kind of mass that you see, this humanoid shape kind of thing. And it was a human shape. I thought it was my dad.
Oh.
And so I look and I see this sort of figure walk past my bedroom door, and I didn't think anything of it. I thought, oh, Dad must have been up to the bathroom or something. Put my head back down. Then I look up again, because I just felt something strange. And I see like the head sort of part of the body peek around the corner of the doorway. Oh. And I was like, what's going on? And so that time I did actually get up and go to see if it was my dad. And he was sleeping. He was in bed. And so, and everybody else was in bed too. So that like, I don't know what to explain or how to explain what that was.
Right.
But it was just this movement, that looked like a human shape. But it was like it was dark, but it wasn't like black. It was like, maybe it was just noticeably different than the surrounding.
Okay.
And so, when I saw it sort of peek its head back around the corner of the doorway, I thought, oh, that's weird. I don't know what's going on. And again, absolutely terrified, covered my head with my blankets and just kind of hoped it would go away, and eventually fell back asleep again.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, and so that was a bit unnerving as well. Not quite. I wasn't quite as terrified as hearing the voice, but it set me off a little bit. It was just uncomfortable,
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I mean, that's one thing that really blows me away, and I don't know how it happens, but it's actually very common as well, is that people are having these terrifying moments, like seeing a figure. Oftentimes seeing a figure standing at the foot of the bed, or sitting at the foot of the bed, or something, or putting in some way interacting with the person in a terrifying manner. And yet people talk about putting their head under the covers and eventually falling asleep. And I'm like, man, that's got to be great to be able to fall asleep in that moment, because what else is there? You're just going to sit there. Wow.
Yeah, well, it's interesting too because my kids are at the age right now where they wake up and they're scared, and so they'll come and
Sure.
we have a little mattress that they can sleep beside our bed if they're super scared and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember doing that as a kid. I would go and I would sleep beside my parents' bed when I was scared at night, and but I also remember many nights where I would just be terrified for whatever reason. I'd think that somebody was going to break into our house. And so my blankets were always the thing that would protect me in my mind, right? As a kid. And so that's where I felt safe. And so as long as I was covered underneath those covers in my head, as this 7, 8, 9-year-old kid,
right,
I believed wholeheartedly that I'd be safe. And so, I used to be terrified of aliens abducting me or, something like that. And so as long as I couldn't see any lights, as long as they couldn't see me, then I was fine. So that's I think that was how I would be able to get back to sleep in those instances. And I guess it worked.
Well, thank God it did. Wow. That's pretty intense. So now this is a few incidences now within the same house. And did you guys end up moving or what was going on then?
Well, we lived there till I was about 17, but that actually leads to kind of the next thing. And this is maybe just coincidence or maybe just the fact that it was my grandpa, my dad's dad, passed away when I was 17. Oh. And I'm 40 now, so, that's quite a while ago.
Sure.
But we moved out of that house shortly after he passed away. But he was... I think he was 80 or 81 and still in reasonable health. He had some health issues in his life.
Okay.
And, but, generally doing okay. He was going to the hospital for surgery, not major surgery. It was like an exploratory thing. I think they were looking for possible cancer just because he had it before and there was some signs that it might be showing up again.
Sure.
And so goes into the hospital. He never came out. He actually ended up having a heart attack after his surgery, and he passed away while he was in the hospital. However, he had basically prepared absolutely everything as though he knew he wasn't coming home.
Oh, wow.
And so like because my grandma, she never drove. He always drove. She didn't have her driver's license. She had gotten in a small accident when she was really, really young, and she just never wanted to drive again. Oh. And so the last time he drove his vehicle, he always pulled in forward into his driveway. The last time before he went to the hospital, because I think it was my dad or maybe one of his siblings that took my grandpa to the hospital, he backed the vehicle into the driveway as though, this is going to be sitting for a while, right? And it turned out that he had actually also made sure that all bills were paid and just like logistics of, somebody passing away. Now he was, 80, 81. So, he may have just thought in his head, I may not come home. But there was also this little bit of oddity that, it was almost like he knew that he wasn't going home. And I remember my dad reflecting about that. And just kind of saying, this is really strange because that's not really how his dad would normally have operated. Uh-huh. And so that was just a bit of an odd experience. So, take it for what it is or, interpret it how you will. But it was just one of those things that was like, that's a little bit strange.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
And so it was a little bit odd, but anyway, and then we ended up moving to a little town about 20 minutes away from where I grew up. And I'm the youngest of 3 kids by a decent margin, a few years. And so it was just me left at home with my parents. I was going into my final year of high school. And where I grew up out in Southern Ontario area, we got a lot of snow. Like a lot of snow in the wintertime. And I was driving, and it was, like I said, it was about a 20-minute drive in good weather. Driving down the road and going to work. And I had a part-time janitor job. And I hit a patch of ice, and I spun out. And I went across the opposing lane of traffic and completely off the road. But the interesting thing about that one was that it all along that entire stretch of highway, with the exception of like, I'd say maybe like 100 to 200 feet, on that particular side of the road, all along the rest of it is like a big, huge ditch where if I had gone off the road at any other place, I'd have flipped that car over. You probably wouldn't have come out of it.
Sure.
Cause I was doing probably, 50,
Right.
55 miles an hour, maybe. So 100 kilometers an hour.
Mm-hmm.
And I came out of it completely unscathed. I was able to just drive away from it, and nothing happened to the car. I was, freaked right out. But I actually, on my way back home, I stopped at that location again just to kind of look to see how much room there was. And it was like this very, very, very small amount of space where I could have had just a safe, a safe exit, I guess, without having any injuries or having a serious incident, and no other vehicles and all that kind of stuff. And so again, these are the things that I would just kind of chalk up to coincidence.
Right.
And my parents would always say, because I was a little bit accident prone as a kid, and they'd always say that I had a guardian angel working overtime.
Sure.
Just to keep me safe. So that was something that struck me pretty hard. Just that, obviously I need to be more careful as I'm driving in snow, but also, I shouldn't have really walked away from that, or it's, there's this chances of me hitting that one tiny little spot are just astronomical. Right. And so something was, from my perspective anyway, something was, keeping me around, whatever that means.
Absolutely. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yep. Huh.
Yeah.
I've been in several of those myself, and it's sometimes amazing the amount of chance and happenstance that just totally lines up in unbelievable ways to make it okay, whereas it very easily couldn't have been. Yeah. And there was another incident while I was actually a couple while in driving, and these were kind of somewhere in my late teens, early 20s. Okay.
Young adulthood. I used to drive between Southern Ontario and Saskatchewan for college. And it would take us about 29 hours. And so we would me and whoever was with me, would usually be two of us, we'd just drive straight through. I always got the night shift. And so we're driving in Northern Ontario, so along the northern shore of Lake Superior. And there is nothing up there. It's like forest and mountains and lakes, and that's it. You've got hours of no towns, no gas stations, nothing. So it's, I don't know, sometime around probably 2:00 in the morning. And I'm driving and, tired, but I had, had a coffee the last time we had stopped, and, just kind of pumped myself full of caffeine and whatever. I wouldn't do it now, but back then that's what we did. And my buddy that was with me, he was sleeping in the passenger seat. And I hadn't seen any animals or anything like that. And, at nighttime, you usually will see some animals, and you have to be careful. And I was kind of keeping my eye out, but hadn't seen really anything. And this is an area where there's a lot of moose, and but I hadn't seen one yet. So anyway, out of nowhere, my buddy who was sleeping jolts forward and reaches over and tries to grab the steering wheel. Oh, God. And he's like, whoa, 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 whoa. And I'm like, what's going on? And he's coming out of this dream. And he's like, it's a moose. It's a moose. And I'm like, dude, there's no moose. And I'm like having to actually like slap his hand away so he's not grabbing the wheel of the car. Oh, terrible. And he's like, oh, man, it must have just been a dream. And not a word of a lie, within 20 minutes, a moose starts roaming out onto the road. And that moment had totally, it woke me up. I wasn't sleepy anymore. And so now I was fully alert, fully awake, like able to pay attention, and he's awake with me now. And this moose just starts kind of 20 minutes later, starts walking up onto the road. And so I had to actually stop the vehicle and wait for it. So I'm like dead stop in the highway, and it's like 2:30 in the morning in the middle of nowhere. And that was the only moose that I saw that whole night.
That's pretty crazy. Yeah. What are the odds, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And so like, and I don't know if he remembers it. I haven't seen him in a number of years, but we did sort of tell that story afterwards. It's like, this was a really weird experience, you know?
Yeah.
And cause I mean, I think we were driving my first car, which was a 1984 Chevy Cavalier. And, like that thing would have been toast if we had hit a moose.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, so we would have been toast. And it, just for whatever reason, he had this sort of dream, shocked me awake. And so then I was actually alert so that I could stop the vehicle when we actually did see him moose in a few minutes.
That's pretty cool. And you got to think of what are the odds that he would have a vision of the exact same thing, even though he was, you know, obviously you were much more prepared for it after the fact. But during that dream, it was, oh my God. And it would have been. So that's really cool. Wow.
Yeah, it was a very surreal experience, I'll tell you. And the one other thing that happened while on a highway, and this was, it was the year that my brother got married, and he got married in this small town way, way up north. Like, you know, it was in this tiny, tiny town in the north of Saskatchewan. So up close, actually relatively close to the Northwest Territories. And it was nighttime. We had been out doing something, me and a friend, and we were going back to where we were staying, and it was dark. I think it was probably about a half an hour drive to where we were going. And again, it was probably, you know, maybe midnight, 11:30 midnight. I don't know, somewhere around there. And we're driving down this highway again, nothing around, just woods and highway. No animals, nothing like that. But we are driving and have the high beams on, and I was the passenger and somebody else was driving. And literally, like, without a word of a lie, as if from nowhere, a man appears on the side of the road, walking down the side of the road.
Oh.
And she was completely like startled, and she kind of let out a little scream, not really, just a little bit like jolt, shock noise. Whoa!
Yeah.
Where did that guy come from? And I was like, I don't know. And then, and I didn't see him ahead of time, and we weren't going around a major curve, just driving down straight. This part of the road was straight. And, there's this guy walking down the road out of nowhere. And we didn't see him before we were almost passing him. But then somehow he was there, and then we just kind of kept going. But it was, and you know, people do walk on the side of the road, and I'm sure it happens in the middle of the night and that sort of thing. But it literally was like he wasn't there, and then he was. And so it was just this really strange experience. And like, I remember the person I was with, she recounted that the next day to other people. Yeah, this weird thing happened last night. It was like, we almost hit this guy because he's walking on the side of the highway, but we didn't see him as we were coming up. And then, he just like showed up on the side of the road.
Sure.
And so, yeah, and like I said, all of these things, I can remember them, but I had never really put much weight on them.
Yeah.
And just kind of, I don't know why I passed them off, or just kind of didn't really think much of them, but that's just what I did.
Well, and those are clearly they could be normal, incidents, but they could also not be. And I think you're right. I think a lot of people would just normally go, oh, oof, I didn't quite see that, but thank goodness. And that was it. Chalk it up as a done. But, there could be any number of phenomena at work at that moment. But yeah, for sure. In any case, tragedy was avoided.
Was averted, yeah.
Several times.
Which, thankfully awesome for everybody involved, right?
Yeah. Just because, can you imagine what it would be like to carry that? Like you would hit some guy. And
that'd be terrifying.
Yeah, absolutely. The scars, the pain, the responsibility. So in any case, it's a great story, and I'm glad it worked out well.
Me too. Yeah. And, I can keep going.
Sure.
So but this was before, no, actually it was after I had started college. It was the first summer between school years. And so I had gone back home to Ontario and living with my parents. I had a job and worked for the summer. But I would stay up late and I would watch movies and stuff like that. And this one particular night, and we at that point in time, we lived in, this is after that first house that we had lived in that I was talking about before. But we were kind of in a wooded area, a bit of a wooded area. Not quite outside of town, but we were just at the outskirts of a very small town. It was kind of a vacation spot. And so summertime, there'd be lots more people than wintertime and whatnot. But this night I'm watching for the first time The Shining. And so, I'm watching this, creepy movie and I was actually kind of enjoying it. Never seen it before or whatever, but I was kind of in that state, in that mood of, heightened awareness or whatever. And there's a big picture window in the room where I was watching TV. It was a garage that we had converted into a living space. And this was sometime late, it was probably about 1 o'clock in the morning. I'm watching this movie. I'm, freaked out a little bit by the movie. It's not that intense, but it's something. And all of a sudden I see this movement out the window. And I look, and there are these 3 massive dogs that come running up to the house, and they're like sniffing around the front of our house. I had never seen these dogs before. They're almost like mastiffs or something. Like they were big. They were big, gray-like dogs. And they kind of circled around out front of the house for a little bit. And I was terrified, absolutely terrified. And so I remember like getting up and going and like looking out the window to see where they went. And I had no idea where they went. It was like they were there and then they weren't. Right. And then, I told my parents the next day, and my dad just laughed and he's like, "Oh, you had some demon dogs coming after you, did you?" And, that sort of thing. Sure. And, but like, I don't know where they came from. None of our neighbors had dogs, big dogs, let alone 3 of them that were the same type of animal, same breed and everything. And I never saw them after that. Huh. And it was this really strange experience. And, I don't know anything, I don't know if there were missing dogs in the area or whatever, but yeah, so, it was freaky.
Can I ask you a question about that?
Yeah.
Most often, and it seems to come up quite a bit, is that when people are in the company of something evil, they do feel that unusual amount of fear. Now, would you say the amount of fear you felt was unusual for the circumstance? Or
absolutely. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. It was like, and I can be startled, not super easily. Yep. But I can be startled. And there have been other times where something just caught me off guard and I was like, oh, but then I'm fine. It just, I'm good. This was like, those aren't like, this isn't right. There's something not right about this. Yeah. And I was actually afraid. Yeah. And, I don't have a lot of experiences in adulthood where I can say that I've been legitimately scared, and I was.
Yeah. Yeah. I think you got to trust those gut feelings for sure, especially in this stuff, because, where our logic brain will bring you so far, but it's that emotional knowing that you just got to trust.
Yeah. And it was something else. That's for sure.
Wow. Jeez.
Yeah.
But that was it then. And then they were just gone. And
never saw them again. No other interaction or anything.
Thank God. Huh?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So where to next, sir?
Oh, that's a good question. Actually, there's one thing that I forgot about when I was a bit younger.
Okay.
And like I said, I grew up in a pretty conservative religious sort of space. And so at church one day, and this was like Sunday morning, the service had just finished. I was going through the auditorium and there wasn't anybody around me. And I was looking at something on the window, and I felt a full hand touch my shoulder. Mm. You know how you can kind of feel a twitch or something, and right. It feels like there's something touching you, but you're like, oh, there's nothing. This was like, it was like somebody was behind me and they put their hand on my shoulder. I could feel the thumb and the fingers kind of wrap around, and then it was gone. And I thought it was somebody messing with me, right? Sure. Turn around both ways, look all around. There's nobody within probably 10 or 20 feet of me. And so I had this, while I was in church, I had this experience where it felt like somebody was full on just touching my shoulder. They weren't grabbing. It wasn't like a grab or anything like that. It was just like you could feel a full hand. Right. It was my left shoulder. And I remember not really knowing what to think about that.
Yeah.
And again, the sort of spiritual things weren't out of the question for me, but I never really thought, oh, well, these are things that are happening to me.
Yeah. Right.
It's just some sort of nebulous idea that's there that we talk about, and it happened in the Bible or, thousands of years ago, but it doesn't happen now. Or if it does, it's not going to happen to me. Sure. Right. But that happened.
Now, can I ask you, with your religious upbringing, there's some religious traditions that say there is no ghost. There's just people and demons. And was yours open to the idea of ghosts, or did it not really ever come up, or what was your feeling?
No, it was always, the interpretation was always that if there's anything abnormal or spiritual that goes on, then it must be demonic. Okay. Unless it's very clearly angelic. That was kind of the sort of message that got sort of, I remember, so I actually worked as a pastor for about 10 years. Okay. And when I was going through the training for that, I was working in a church in Alberta. And one of the people that worked in our office, she talked about the ghosts that they had in their house. And so she would talk about experiences of like, they would kind of feel cold at certain times, or things would move when they weren't looking. The most common, I think, experience for them was the curtains would kind of move and look as if somebody's sitting down on sort of the window ledge, the windowsill. Okay. And the people that were sort of my supervisors, their immediate response was, well, we got to do something about that. That's demonic. And that was kind of the push there. And I don't honestly remember if they ever did anything like that. Sure. But I do remember that being a regular part of conversation. Okay. And then, I remember there was a teenager that we were working with who had been exploring in some occult practices and stuff like that. And I do actually believe that she had some sort of oppression going on, where she was being affected by some sort of dark entity. Right. And then at one point it kind of came to a head, and, they performed a proverbial exorcism, where, they got names of the evil entities that were affecting her, and then she felt entirely different after that. I do remember that, but I wasn't in the room for that. I just sort of helped kind of guide them towards doing that at the time. Sure. So yeah, I didn't have that personal experience there, but I do remember what she was like before, sort of meeting and then after, and it was like two different people.
Oh, that's wonderful. Okay.
Yeah. That was an interesting one for sure. And like I can't reflect on firsthand experience there. I was more afraid than anything. I didn't want to be in the room for it, to be honest.
I don't blame you. No.
Yeah, it was just sort of external from my own frame of reference and that sort of thing.
Right.
And so it was it was something else. But and I honestly don't know whatever happened or came of that. But yeah.
Very cool. So, is there anything else then? We're now.
Oh yeah. There's a couple. So I think there's a few more here. So one was this is the closest thing that I think I can describe. The closest thing I think I can describe this as was an out of body experience. Mm-hmm. Where in my first year of college, no, it was my second year of college. Sorry, I was at Bible college because I was training to be a pastor.
Okay,
and I'm in a class. I can't remember what the class was. I remember who the teacher was, and I remember sort of the setting that we were in. There was tables that were kind of oriented in a sort of square so that we could all see each other. Mm-hmm. And it was like discussion oriented course. And in that moment, this one day in class, I was looking out the window because there's windows and you could see cars going by. And while I'm sitting there, at first it felt like I was just kind of daydreaming, like just drifting off, zoning out, whatever. Mm-hmm. But then actively, as I'm sitting there, I can now no longer hear what anybody around me is saying. The professor is talking and his mouth is moving, his lips are moving. And I wasn't like looking at myself, but it was like I was behind myself. And kind of watching what was going on. And this one wasn't an audible voice. It was like a very, very strong impression, a verbal impression. Just the question I heard was, "What are you doing here?"
Right.
And I was kind of in that sort of weird nebulous space for, it felt like a few minutes. It was probably only a few seconds. And then all of a sudden everything kind of came back to normal, and I was hearing the conversation that was going on. I was back sitting in my chair, back into sort of normal everyday life kind of thing.
Right.
And I remember after that, I walked out of class and I was totally stunned. Like I was, I didn't know what to do with that. And so I went to a friend of mine and I just said, I just had this experience. And they believed me, which was kind of important for me at the time.
Sure.
And two, they just said, well, maybe you need to find the answer. And so I just kind of spent a lot of time trying to figure out, what am I doing here? Why am I doing this particular program? Why am I in it? It would end up being about a 2-year long process where I was like, what am I doing? And trying to figure out, okay, what am I going to do with my life and that sort of thing. But it was this one specific moment that it was like everything the reality changed, and then it came back to normal again. It's like it's a vivid memory. Like I can picture that exact space, the people, all of that stuff as if I was there just yesterday.
End up changing course in your life past this reflection moment or this period, or did you continue?
I did. Okay. Took a little while.
Okay.
So
sure.
So I'm an addictions counselor now. So I haven't been working in churches for a number of years. There's a lot of reasons for that.
Okay.
But eventually the process that I went through at that period of time, I started actually thinking maybe I need to be working overseas, like in some other country and, the backwoods somewhere, and being a missionary, because that was a big push in our little world at the time. And so I was very seriously thinking about that. And so that whole process of a couple of years kind of ended up keeping me in Canada instead of going somewhere else. And then it ended up kind of placing me in certain spaces and places that have led me to where I am now. So it certainly did have an impact, and things have changed substantially through that time.
Right.
But and I've had a couple experiences like that where it's like not verbal, like not audible voice, but very, very strong impressions of specific either questions or statements about something that's going on in life. And I've made decisions at times based on that.
Yeah, I think that's beautiful too. I mean, it's like it's I don't know, just maybe an intervention, maybe a moment just to cause you to reflect, but maybe to correct course. And not that I know, what is the good course for you and what isn't, but whenever a moment becomes transformative like that, I mean, it turns into a key moment in your life. So,
for sure.
Do you feel like you took the right course?
That's a really good question. I don't know that I can
Sure.
give you a straight answer on that. I mean, there are times when I think back and think, man, I should have done this kind of stuff as counseling, psychology. I should have gone this route years ago. It probably would have saved me a lot of pain and struggle.
Sure.
Because this is honestly the first time in life where I feel like where I'm actually doing something that matters and that I can enjoy. And that has not ever been the case for me. Not that things haven't mattered or that I haven't enjoyed periods of time, but just, it's kind of a sweet spot right now. And so there's a part of me that wonders, would I have enjoyed the last 20 years a lot more had I done this before rather than waiting this long to get here? But I'm kind of the poster boy for late bloomers in life. So, so I can appreciate that, finding what you need and where you belong is a wonderful thing, but it makes you think, God, what took me so long? So, and I don't mean to get too personal, so forgive me, but it's just, it's a big curiosity for me because I think that, we are guided, we are led, and sometimes the interventions are incredibly profound and much like in your case. So it made you stop and reflect and brought you to a better place. So that's really powerful. That's beautiful. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
for sure. Yeah. And so there is one other experience that is entirely different, and then the last one that had me actually contact you. But there was one time, and this was my only description is that I saw some sort of like unidentified object in the sky, and I was driving down a relatively main route. I was in Saskatchewan at the time, and it was nighttime. I don't know how late. It wasn't super late. I was driving home from a friend's place. I'd been staying with a friend for a couple of nights, and they were about 2 hours away from where I was living. So I was driving home and driving down this stretch of highway where there's not really a whole lot. There's farms and there's small towns kind of sprinkled in because this is prairies, and the prairies are vast, flat, and empty, primarily. And, and then you've got these little tiny towns, so you can see sort of little blips of light in the distance, as you're going. So I'm driving down the highway, and, I just happened to look over to, I believe it was to my left. And, I see this formation of lights. I can't remember if it was 3 or 4 lights that were sort of in close proximity to each other, and they were stationary at first. And I'm driving, I'm going a good I don't know, probably 70 miles an hour, and so but these lights weren't moving, and so I was like, oh well, that must be thinking that must be like a tower, some kind of communications tower or something. Sure. And then all of a sudden, as I'm looking, I'm still like glancing over at the highway to make sure I'm driving and that sort of thing. But I keep looking over to see what what's going on with these lights in the sky, because they weren't stars, and they weren't like flashing. They were solid, and they were in this formation. And then as I look, they go from stationary to moving very fast across the sky, and then they stop again. And they're stationary again. And then they move very fast again to a different place. And then they stop again. And then they move very fast, and then they're gone. They disappear completely.
Okay.
And I didn't see them after that. Mm-hmm. And so I was like, and it was like, okay, that's not normal movement for airplanes. Those aren't stars. That's not, it wasn't like a meteorite or anything like that. It was like something. I have no idea what. It was fairly far off in the distance. So it was small to the eye, but there were distinct lights you could see.
Sure. Okay.
And they just moved like nothing moves. Mm-hmm. And then I went, when I got home, I just remember thinking, that's really weird. Like I'd never seen anything like that before. Yeah. And I remember getting home and I thought, I wonder if other people have seen that. So I Googled it. And this was almost 20 years ago now. So, Google wasn't quite the same as it is now. But I did discover that there had been multiple reports of people seeing similar things in that exact same area. Wow. So it was between these two little towns that were probably about 20 minutes apart.
Okay.
And like, I don't know, probably at least a dozen other accounts of people that had left messages on this one forum that I had found, that they had seen, unidentified objects, lights in the sky in that particular spot. Mm-hmm. And so no idea what it was. There's there was no way for me to find out specifically, but I did find out that other people had seen the same thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
And to be honest, at the time, and even now, I don't even really know what I think about the whole UFO thing. I don't, there's a part of me that wonders, is it a multi-dimensional kind of situation? Is it a spiritual thing, or is it people or beings from some other place in the universe? What is that? I don't know.
Yeah.
But it was just a strange experience.
It is. I've had the benefit of seeing pretty up close and personal saucer myself, and it was incredible. Like, I'd been looking my whole life, and then finally the day came where it was there, and I was there, and it was this incredible, profound moment for me. Not because it taught me anything new, but it was just, I guess, the affirmation that, look, this is bigger. This is so much bigger than we think. And so for me, it was just kind of a rescaling of the important things in life. It's like, well,
for sure,
now we're universal. Like, initially we're a planetary thing, but when you have that confirmation, it's like, okay, now we're in a universal society. And that to me felt incredibly huge and profound and important. I'm going to get some emails. Last show, I got an email from a listener. It's like, Kyle, if I could have a nickel for every time Brent says profound, but I don't know what other word to put on it. It's like fair, these incredibly powerful moments that we experience, and they could be, maybe even dismissed by a lot of people. But when you think of the ramifications of that's enormous. I mean, it is enormous. We're not alone. We are a part of a universal society of some kind. And you're right. It could be transdimensional. It could be some other, understanding or layering of physics than we currently understand. But the point is we're not alone. And I think that's huge.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And as I've been sort of reflecting on these things, it's been really kind of causing me to think through, what have been my perspectives on these things in the past? Yeah. How have I, oftentimes I've just dismissed them. Yeah. And it's not because I'm not willing to engage, but it's just because it's just so far out of the ordinary that it's like, well, I just don't even know what to do with it.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And so putting it into words, like I think it was before we started recording, but I mentioned that as I was thinking about these things, I don't even think I shared them with my wife.
Yeah.
And it's not because I was hiding anything from her.
Sure.
It was just simply because I just hadn't really thought much about them.
Right.
But then comes this experience that I actually emailed you about, because I had to get some sort of confirmation or something about this. Because it was certainly the most recent, but probably one of the more surreal experiences that I've had.
Yeah.
And so, as I had mentioned before, I listened to podcasts at night. And so I had stumbled across Paranormal Portal, and I've been listening for a few weeks, probably a couple of weeks. And so, listening to different things, and like the cryptid episodes have just kind of got me thinking. Never really thought much about that stuff before. Got me thinking. And then, the paranormal, the ghost stories and stuff like that those are the interesting ones for me,
Sure.
Primarily. But I'm listening to it, and I'm kind of starting to drift off, so I'm kind of entering into that lucid state where you're aware of your surroundings, but you're starting to sleep, and that you're starting to fall asleep.
Yeah. And
in my headphones, so it wasn't my ears, it was in my headphones. And I can't remember the name of the person you were talking to in that episode. But it was in a moment where you two were having a conversation back and forth. And I heard, the best way that I can describe it is, it was kind of like the sound of tinnitus, that sort of ringing in your ears.
Sure.
But it wasn't sort of faint. It was like it was fading in, almost like you had done it on purpose. Then that's what I had emailed you initially.
Oh, yeah.
I was like, did you do something weird with the sound? And, have you ever done this just to mess with people? Because I was like, this is so weird. Yeah. And that sound kind of comes in, and then your voice and your guest voice were like phasing in and out. And it was just like, the best way I can describe it, it was just like somebody was tuning a radio station on an old analog, like dial radio.
Wow.
And there's other voices that are kind of pumping in. And it was multiple other voices that I could hear. I didn't know what they were saying, but I could hear words, like word formations. Mm-hmm. And then I would hear your voice, and it would be like one word. And then I'd hear the other guy's voice, and it'd be like one word. And then these other voices kind of intermingling. And this probably went on for about 30 seconds.
Mm.
And then that noise again, that ringing, pardon me, that ringing came through again. Mm-hmm. And then everything was back to normal. Wow. And you were in mid-conversation. It was midway through the show, and then I fell asleep. And so I woke up in the middle of the night, and it was middle of the night that I emailed you initially. And woke up in the middle of the night, and I was trying to figure out, where was this? And I couldn't find it. And so then I just ended up sleeping. And the next day I went through and I figured out which episode it was. And then I went through that whole episode, and there was nothing like that, nothing at all in that episode. And I've heard some of the, the interesting sounds that you've included in a couple episodes and things like that. Yeah. Nothing like that. And this was through my headphones, not something that I was just hearing. It was actually going through my phone, into my headphones and into my ears.
That's incredible. Yeah.
And I was like, he must have done something just to mess with people or something. And it's not that I take you for that type of person. No. It was just it was just so odd and surreal that it had to be that, because there was no other explanation. Yeah. And so that's what made me reach out to you.
Well, I'm sure glad you did. And yeah, I don't generally do anything other than press record and have a talk with people, but I find those kind of stories interesting. I hear back from listeners every once in a while stating that there's anomalous things they've heard, sometimes EVPs that they want to point out to me and stuff. And And there's some out there that I can't, what's wrong with my headphones? Here we go. I can't dispute, but I also, there's any number of factors that I can't be 100% sure either, but I think, the weirdness comes when it comes, it happens when it happens. And it's incredible experience for those that receive them. So I'm just really thrilled you did reach out, Troy, because this has been a fantastic discussion, and it's fantastic to meet you and have this discussion with you.
Yeah, well, I appreciate it. I was actually really surprised that I part of me didn't even think I'd hear back from you, because I was like, oh, he probably gets tons of emails about this kind of stuff. And, but I remember, I think I put in the subject line, am I the only one that heard this?
Yeah, it was something bizarre like that. And I was trying to decipher what you meant exactly, and I wasn't really sure, but then as we corresponded a bit, you were able to, bring a little more light into it. And it's like, yeah, no, that's definitely not something I do. The only thing I do, generally speaking, is I produce sometimes introductions to shows like the Tombstone show or, the Vampire show or whatever. And those are fun for me, but it's also just a chance to do something different. But I don't,
for sure.
I usually don't, I don't mean to even say usually. I never do mind games with my listeners.
Yeah, that's fair. Well, and the other thing too is that this was very much sort of in the middle of the episode. So it wasn't even during, the beginning introduction where you do play music or anything like that. It was like mid conversation. You guys were in the middle of whatever you're talking about, and this just kind of happens, and it was me hearing it. And I told my wife the next day, and this was the first time that I had told her anything like that. And I just said, I know this guy that does this podcast because this is what happened. And then that's when I realized, I was like, have I ever actually told you any of the other stuff that's happened to me? She says, no, I don't think you have. It's like, wow, all right, here we go.
Yeah, buckle up, honey.
Yeah. So and she's like, you're not going to tell me anything freaky about this place, are you? And I said, no, we're good. Don't worry about that.
Well, it's been an absolute pleasure, brother. And thank you. And also, if anything else comes up, please reach out to me again. I'd love to have you back and discuss anything more. Wow. That would be wonderful.
Yeah. I'm still waiting on that Bigfoot experience. Hopefully it'll happen at some point.
Well, yeah, careful what you wish for, but yeah.
Yeah, right.
All right, Troy. Pleasure meeting you, sir. Thank you again.
You as well. Thank you.
Get out!
Guys, thank you so much for joining us here on tonight's show. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Please feel free to follow us on Facebook, facebook.com/Paranormal Portal Radio, as well as finding us on Twitter. We're on Twitter at Paranormal Portal, PORTL, and we'd love to have you stop by our YouTube page and subscribe and check out our shows there. We got hundreds of shows, journeys into the Paranormal Portal, so I hope you'll check it out, guys. We're over there at youtube.com/Paranormal Portal, so hope to see you guys soon. We'll be back, of course, for more podcasts in the coming days. So we love you all. Be good, be kind, be nice. Take care of each other. Help each other out. Find the magic in every day. And remember to laugh as much as you can.